Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to talk about a legal case that completely changed the game. It redefined what cruelty in a marriage even means in India. And trust me, the effects of this one are still huge today. So let's start with a big question, one you've probably thought about. When does a really unhappy marriage cross the line and become, well, legally cruel? Where is that line exactly? Well, back in 2002, a pretty bitter dispute between one couple finally gave us an answer. A huge Supreme Court judgment came down that changed everything. But man, it only happened after a legal fight that dragged on for more than 15 years. All right, so to really get why this case is such a big deal, we've got to start with the people at the heart of it all. Okay, so here's the couple. They got married way back in 1979, and you'll see they were both really, really well educated. The husband, G.V.N. Kameswara Rao, had 2 doctorates and was working over in the States. The wife, Jabilli, had a postgraduate degree and was a lecturer. Now, you might think, okay, who cares? But stick with me because their backgrounds actually end up being super important to the court's final ruling. It's kind of surprising. So let's get into the he said, she said of it all. The court records are pretty blunt. They say the marriage was troublesome from the very beginning. Yeah, not a great start. And as the years went on, things just got worse, with all these bitter fights and accusations flying back and forth. You can almost see the relationship breaking down in stages. In '82, she goes to India and just refuses to come back to the US for 6 whole months. That almost ended it right there. But the real point of no return? That was 1985. She comes back to India, doesn't even tell him, and then not only blocks him from seeing their own daughter, but she files a criminal complaint against him. Whoa. So when this all gets to court, you have 2 totally different versions of reality. On his side, he's talking about a pattern of public humiliation, insults, and a completely false criminal complaint. But on her side, she's saying, hold on, he was neglectful, he treated me badly, and he's the one to blame for this whole mess. Let's dig into the husband's side for a second. His whole case was built around this idea of severe mental agony. He's not just talking about arguments. He's talking about being publicly humiliated, like that time she wouldn't let him into her sister's house in front of everyone. And then the big one, the criminal complaint. He argued it was totally baseless and was just designed to destroy his reputation. But then you flip it around, and the wife's defense is basically, he was the problem. She claimed he treated her like she didn't even belong in their own home, that he was always out at parties, playing cards, and basically ignoring his family. From her point of view, everything she did, it wasn't cruelty. It was just her reacting to his bad behavior. So you've got these 2 totally opposite stories. The case starts its long, slow crawl through the legal system, and this is where it gets wild, because you have 2 different courts looking at the exact same evidence, and they come up with 2 completely different verdicts. Okay, check this out. First up is the family court. They hear everything and say, yep, this is mental cruelty, divorce granted. Case closed, right? Nope. It goes to the high court and they completely reverse it. They deny the divorce. Their reasoning was that because the husband had tried to get a divorce years earlier, he was also at fault and couldn't, take advantage of his own wrong. So now, they're at a total standstill. This legal mess, this complete contradiction, means the case has only one place left to go, the Supreme Court of India. Now the pressure is really on. The top court in the country has to step in and answer some massive questions about what cruelty and fault even mean in a marriage. So what does the Supreme Court have to figure out? It really boils down to 2 things. First, was what the wife did actually, legally, mental cruelty? And second, was the high court right? Does the fact that the husband tried for divorce once before mean he can't get one now? Is he also at fault? To even begin to answer those questions, the court knew they had to do something pretty big. They had to take this old, kind of vague idea of mental cruelty and give it a clear, modern definition. And wow, the definition they came up with was a game changer. It basically says mental cruelty is any conduct that causes so much mental pain and suffering that it's just not possible for the other person to live with them anymore. The key phrase here is that the couple just can't reasonably be expected to live together. It's not about bruises. It's about the breaking point of the mind. And this quote right here, this is the core of it. The court says, and I'm paraphrasing a bit, you don't have to prove this cruelty made you physically sick. That is a huge deal. It means the mental suffering on its own, if it's bad enough, is grounds for divorce. The pain itself is the injury.
So, with this new definition in hand, the Supreme Court laid out this really clear four-part way of thinking about the case. First, look at the whole story, not just one fight. Second, think about who these people are. Their background matters. Third, they decided that yes, filing a false criminal complaint is a form of mental cruelty. And finally, they cleared up that whole at-fault mess.
This is probably the most important part of their reasoning. It's called the cumulative effect doctrine. The court said, look, we're not just going to focus on that one incident at Araku Valley or just the criminal complaint. No, it was the whole pattern. The constant stress, the refusal to cooperate, the public fights, it was the weight of all of it, piling up year after year that added up to cruelty. And remember how I said their educational background would matter? This is why. The court made a really specific point here. They argued that for someone like the husband, a highly educated professional with 2 doctorates, public humiliation and a false criminal charge aren't just embarrassing, they can be career-destroying. The psychological damage is way more severe because of who he is. The context of their lives was absolutely key. So, what was the final decision? Well, the verdict that came down in 2002 did more than just end this one couple's nightmare. It created a legal earthquake, setting a precedent that completely changed family law in India. It was a decisive win for the husband. The Supreme Court said the High Court got it wrong, and they overturned that decision. They granted the divorce on the grounds of mental cruelty. After more than 15 years, the marriage was finally legally over. And the impact? Huge. For more than 20 years now, this case has been the one everyone points to. It's a landmark precedent that has been used in countless other divorce cases all across India. It's a cornerstone of family law. So if you're going to remember anything about this case, remember these 4 things. It gave us a new modern definition of mental cruelty. It created the cumulative effect test. You got to look at the whole picture. It said the social and educational background of a couple actually matters. And critically, it confirmed that filing false criminal charges is in itself an act of cruelty. Ultimately, this case is a perfect example of the law trying to catch up with our understanding of human beings, recognizing that emotional and psychological pain can be just as devastating as physical pain. And it kind of leaves us with a big question to think about, right? As our ideas about relationships keep evolving, how do we make sure our laws keep evolving right along with them?